Hey up everyone, this is our journey from Semillé to St Victor, part 4 of our European tour videos, from central France towards the Bordeaux region. To be clear, because there are several, our destination today was St Victor in Nouvelle-Aquitaine, a small village near Ribérac. Google said 406 kilometres without detours, but I had decided to do as much of the journey as possible on smaller roads, so journey time was always going to be longer, and detours were inevitable. Google's projected journey time was 5.5 hours with no stops. My guess was around 7.5 hours. Regardless, it was going to be a long day, but it would take us down towards the Bordeaux region in one journey. It was looking like it was going to be a hot day too, so hydration was going to be really important. I never ride for that far with no stops either, so we had a rough plan to set off at 9 AM and stop for food somewhere near Limoges at least. It was a bright sunny morning, and as you can see, the cows came to say goodbye to us as we wound our way back towards Semillé and then south. The link to the route we took is in the description below. The village of Semillé and the roads around it were empty, as they had been throughout our stay. Even to up fully loaded with luggage, these roads were a pleasure to ride on the 650 V-Strom. At 9 AM it was already hot, so riding gear had been kept to a minimum. It was definitely a day for Kevlar jeans instead of waterproof trousers. The journey was split into 3 sections, and I'm sorry if I butcher any of the names. The first stretch was through back roads for about 70 kilometres towards Moulins before hitting the A79 towards Montmarault and Montreal. Then eventually onto the motorway past Limoges and south towards the Périgord Limousin National Park. The last part of the journey took us through the national park to Fourbex and on to Mirelet, on some faster back roads before we got back onto single track roads for the last 100 kilometres or so. The first stretch was mainly small single track roads through endless miles of open countryside with smaller lush areas of forestry between. As we headed south, there was more forestry, and it was nice to see deciduous trees, not just endless monocrop fir plantations like we get in the UK. There were more towns and villages here too, and even some other traffic, but it was far from busy, as you can see. The only main roads we saw were the ones we crossed over. It was an easy, relaxed ride, and as always the V-Strom felt solid underneath us. After Montluçon, the roads got bigger and eventually turned to motorway for a while as we entered cattle country. The only thing more boring than riding on motorways would be watching somebody else do it, so I haven't included any of that footage. By the time we reached Bessines-sur-Gartempe, we were both hungry and it was very hot, so it was time for a stop. The small cafe in the village square fed us, and with a quick stop to fuel up the bike, we continued south around Limoges. The shade of the trees here was a nice break from the sun, and the roads were bigger and faster with long, predictable sweeping bends. It still wasn't busy though, especially compared to British roads. Even on the back roads the tarmac was smooth too. There were none of the jolting potholes that we seem to suffer so badly from in the UK. Once we were south of Limoges, the architecture did seem to change quite quickly. Many of the buildings were older, some stone built, but many with smooth rendered walls. There were more towns and villages to begin with, and then the forestry got thicker, with less open countryside. The heat was exhausting now, and we had to stop a few times for drinks. It wasn't an easy journey in some ways, but it had been a beautiful ride. Knowing when to stop can be the hardest thing sometimes, but it's important not to push things too far. It got empty again after Champagnac-de-Belair. You can see in the video there were miles of roads with very little anything except the countryside. The only signs of life were scattered farms and small communities. I deliberately left a 12-minute section uncut to give you an idea how empty this area really was. We continued through the lush river valleys with old forests all around, and the houses just seemed more affluent. You can see in the video, as we passed through Villars, the age and history of the communities was obvious. We got to see our very first real chateau too. One of the sad things was that as we got closer to St. Victor, it appeared that more and more properties were empty and abandoned. Some of them were fantastic houses. I guess it's a problem in many rural communities, but it seemed very evident here. The roads continued to follow the river valleys as we got closer to St. Victor, and the scenery was quite special. Big rocky outcrops lined the road at one point, and it looked like there would be plenty to explore while we stayed in the area. It had been a long day of riding with a few stops because it had got so hot, and we were both looking forward to arriving. 9 hours after setting off, we arrived at the village of St. Victor. It was a tiny hamlet built around an ancient church, and we didn't have to look far for the gîte. We got a lovely welcome, but it was almost 6 p.m. by the time we arrived. The last 40 miles had taken over an hour and a half because the roads were so small and wound through lots of tiny villages. By the time we'd unloaded, showered and eaten, it was simply a matter of crawling into bed. We could explore tomorrow. I will show you the area around St. Victor in the next of the European tour videos. Don't forget to hit the like button if you've enjoyed the video, and subscribe to the channel for more motorcycle adventures and other random motorbike chat. The next stage of the tour will be posted soon. If you are interested, the links to the V-Strom merchandise are below too. Definitely worth a look if you are another certified Strom trucker. Ride free everyone!